Historic Glendale, the living village. This land had been an Indian hunting ground. Then it was part of John Cleve Sims' Miami Purchase. Many of the trees had been cleared, and the land now belonged to a farmer, Edmund R. Glenn. This land would become Glendale. The year was 1847, and the Cincinnati, Hamilton, and Dayton Railroad was building north from Cincinnati. The citizens of Springdale didn't want any noisy, dirty railroads fouling their community, so the CH&D bought a right-of-way a little to the east of Springdale through Mr. Glenn's farm. With the coming of the railroad, two visionary entrepreneurs, Mr. George Crawford and Mr. Henry Clark, came up with a revolutionary concept, a planned suburban community with rail access to town. Crawford and Clark bought a total of 600 acres of farmland from Mr. Glenn and Mr. Riddle. The village would be called Glendale, and it would be America's first planned railroad commuter village. 30 prominent citizens formed the Glendale Association. These were some of the very first residents. Glendale was moving from idea to actuality. In 1851, Mr. R.C. Phillips was employed to create a town like no other. He chose a curvilinear design that blended into the existing topography. The town plan looked more like a flower design than the typical tic-tac-toe grid system of most towns. The residences of this town would look out upon green lawns, beautiful flower gardens, and tall shade trees, rather than the crowded, smoky, and congested streets of downtown Cincinnati. Almost immediately, the building began. Business and merchant families were drawn to the new community. Stately home after stately home rose along the curving avenues of Glendale. The Ritter House Hotel went up quickly and attracted many full-time residents and summer tourists. Unfortunately, the hotel residents soon built their own new homes and moved into them. To make matters worse, there was no demand for the hotel rooms during the cold winter months. The hotel was forced to close in 1854. The hotel would be remodeled and to become the Glendale Female College. The Glendale Female College was a finishing school for young ladies run by the Presbyterian Church. The college ran for about 75 years and graduated about 500 alumni. The school closed in the late 20s. The buildings were torn down in the 30s, and the bricks were used to build several houses throughout the village. The promise of a new kind of town had been made and executed. In 1855, Glendale was incorporated. Up to 14 trains a day whisked travelers back and forth between Cincinnati, Glendale, and Hamilton, and Dayton. A railroad commuter could get from Glendale to downtown Cincinnati in less than 75 minutes. The same journey by stagecoach would take at least a half a day. The railroad was clearly the most important lifeline for Glendale. A business district grew up around the depot, the hub of the village. The depot was the one place in town that rich and poor, black and white, Protestants and Catholics would mingle. In addition to its railroad duties, the depot served as the post office, the town hall, a meeting hall, and at times a jail. In 1874, the original two-story frame depot burned to the ground. It was replaced by a single-story brick building on the same foundation. Many of the earlier functions of town hall and jail had been assigned to other buildings. In 1996, after many years of neglect, the building was transferred from CSX to the village. It was then refurbished by volunteers to be the Glendale Heritage Preservation Museum and Gift Shop. Glendale was also a stop for a different kind of railroad, the Underground Railroad. In those days, slavery was still an institution in the South. The Underground Railroad was used for smuggling runaway slaves to freedom in Canada. One local farmer lost his farm for his anti-slavery activities. The Civil War ran between 1861 and 1865. In July of 1863, telegraph chatter along the line told of the audacious raid of General John Hunt Morgan and his 2,000 mounted troops as they swept around the northern fringes of Cincinnati. The warning went out to the suburbs, and with a flurry of activity, local residents buried their valuables and hid their horses. The Confederates knew about the railroad through Glendale and expected a confrontation. But Union troops arrived the next day on horseback. Local legend holds that the young ladies at female college graciously served tea to the officers in gray, but in fact it was the pursuing bluecoats that received the hospitality. Disaster struck on May 14, 1880. A fire broke out in a village square cabinet shop and spread throughout the square. Village firefighters telegraphed to Cincinnati for help. Fire equipment was loaded onto flatbed cars, and the train made a record-breaking 18-minute run. When the smoke cleared, most of the business district had been destroyed. Racker's Tavern, the current Meritage restaurant, and the depot were the only buildings to survive the fire. Almost immediately, the Willis Dooley block in the village square rose from the charred remains of the wooden structures. Because of the recent fire, the building was constructed with brick and mortar and was solid enough to survive a tornado strike in 1912. When the 20th century arrived, it found a vital, mature, and totally independent village. Glendale had a stable government, town marshal, volunteer fire company, gas-lit streets, and a waterworks. Over the years, the men of Glendale would go off to war. Some men would return, some would not. This monument is dedicated to those that served. Prohibition was tolerated in name only, as Bracker's Tavern, then known as Heine's Restaurant, the current Meritage restaurant, had a back room serving booze in a coffee cup. In 1977, Glendale was proclaimed a National Historic Landmark District because of its unique nature and origins. After 170 years of increasing horn volume, the village paid CSX a large sum of contributed money and removed one dangerous grade crossing in exchange for a quiet zone that eliminates train horn noise and adds additional safety equipment. This worthwhile investment has improved village ambience immeasurably. The suburbs and shopping malls have grown out and around Glendale, but still haven't touched the quality of life that has always been serene, friendly, and inclusive. Today, Glendale is the same, with strong government, schools, churches, social organizations, and great youth programs. The village supports fine restaurants and businesses and maintains the traditions and the consciousness of its past. Historic Glendale welcomes you.